Why choose proven quality sleep from Sleep Number? Because our Sleep Number 360 smart bed is really smart. It senses your movement and automatically adjusts to help keep you both comfortable. Plus, it's temperature balancing so you stay cool. It's even smart enough to know exactly how long, how well, and when you slept. Our smart sleepers get 28 minutes more restful sleep per night. Sleep Number takes care of the science. All you have to do is sleep. Don't miss the final days of the biggest sale of the year. Save 50% on the Sleep Number 360 limited edition smart bed. Ends Monday. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
Hi, welcome to your neighborhood pharmacy.
Hi, I've got a prescription for diabetes test strips. How much is the copay?
Well, it depends on your type of commercial insurance and factoring in your yearly spend, subtracting the deductibles, also depending on your monthly allowance.
Why can't there be a better option?
Or you could try Contour Next test strips. A 35 count's only $19.99 over the counter and proven to be highly accurate. Go to contournext.com/radio to see if over-the-counter strips are a more affordable option for you.
I think I'll try Contour Next.
Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. My name is Mason. I host this show, and today we're actually, funny enough, talking to Laird Hamilton, and this interview is from my other show called Without Compromise. I host that show through my day job, Athletic Brewing. You may have heard of it, non-alcoholic craft beer. I talk about it quite a bit here. But anyway, Laird is one of our athletes, but also someone we recently did a collaboration beer with. And if you've ever heard the name Laird Hamilton, it probably has to do with surfing. He is the inventor of big wave surfing, the inventor of the resurgence of paddleboarding, of foil boarding, all sorts of stuff. Maybe it's called foiling. I can't remember. But anyway, Laird he's that guy in surfing, a legend. I don't know if it's the greatest surfer of all time, but really, really far up there. One of the faces on the Mount Rushmore of surfing, absolutely. And it was a pleasure to talk to him. It was really cool. We got to talk about his life, his career, some of the things that make him tick, some of his some of the things that he thinks from a leadership point of view, some of his favorite stories. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. And if you're interested, you can check out some of the other interviews I've done over at Without Compromise. It is slightly different than this show. We don't just talk to adventure athletes. We talk to all kinds of people from the athletic brewing community, but feel free to check that out. But yeah, it was a really fun conversation. And let's go ahead and jump in. Laird, welcome to the show.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, well, we're tag teaming on the parenting right now, so I just handled the first half, and I think Gabby's being called off to the second half of the operation.
Oh man! So how? I know you have 3 daughters. How young is your youngest?
My youngest daughter is she's going to be a junior in high school. So
still at the house.
Yeah, my older daughter and my middle daughter are gone. My middle daughter's in Spain at a tennis academy, and my oldest daughter has a job in LIDAR, and she is busy with that. So, and then my younger daughter's just going to high school, focused on getting good grades, which was a surprise to me.
How are your grades growing up?
My grades were terrible. My school was terrible. My schooling. I was always kind of curious what it would have been like to go to a school that I really wanted to go to. I mean, I had trouble learning to read initially, just because they had some strange reading program that they introduced in elementary school that was not phonetically. And so I got kind of set back in my reading, which really that made it difficult. And then math was always easy. I'm a natural, I think, mathematician. So I didn't have to even go to that school. And then, I was always distracted by surfing and just being encapsulated, being a captive audience in a room with a desk when there was so much nature and excitement outside. That was just not a conducive environment. I think I would have been better in some sort of trade school.
Maybe. Who knows where that would have led? Maybe you wouldn't be doing what you're doing now. But let me ask you this. I've heard you mention having ADHD. Is that just in passing, kind of like people mention having OCD, but not necessarily actually having it? How about you? Is that actually something you deal with? And was that part of it too?
I kind of cracks me up in a way when I think about all these abbreviated terms for natural human behavior. I think we all have certain levels of certain traits, and they're going to say we've kind of separate, and some of that is just natural. I know that and I think it's probably actually useful in somewhere in evolution. That was, some of those things were useful, and then when you try to civilize us all and get us to all cooperate in a structured manner, I think it's not useful maybe sometimes. But I definitely had some issues with just being, short attention span, but being energized, just being like super hyperactive and needing to move. I think if I could have gotten really tired before I went to school, I would have been really a much better learner. I could have sat and really absorbed it. But I just wasn't tired enough.
I've never heard anybody put it that way. A lot of times teenagers especially are too tired at school, but you're the opposite. You need to get that energy out a little bit more. So speaking of that, I did want to bring up, kind of the partnership between us, Athletic Brewing, and Laird Superfood. I want to go back to kind of where that all started, Laird Superfood, that is. You made this thing called special coffee that it came to be known. Can you take us through, you were obviously surfing at this time and trying to be better and getting better. What was the genesis of all that? What started this, and what was in that coffee?
Well, the beginning of my relationship with just drinking coffee in general, because I didn't drink coffee when I was younger. I really got exposed to coffee in Europe, in France, actually. And I would travel to France to these windsurfing events. And we would be in the south of France in the Mediterranean, and it would be rainy and cold. And we'd be sitting on these beaches in these tents, and they'd have some espresso. And I would sit in there and drink some coffee and get caffeinated and get all, I'd say jacked up, but get energized. And that's when my appreciation for good coffee and just coffee in general started. And then I took that habit back home with me to Hawaii and started, looking for high quality coffee and the ways to make it and what was the better way to make it. And, I had a friend of mine, Mr. Paul Check, him and I would drink espresso, and he was putting some ghee in it, and we were like, some ghee and espresso. And that had a unique, I would say, a unique sensation. It would time release the caffeine. And so I got exposed to that. And then the bulletproof guy came along, Dave Asbury, and he was like, yak butter tea. And I was like, I was already experienced, with the ghee and espresso. So I was like, okay, ghee, butter, that's the same stuff. And then the whole coconut oil, which I had a lot of experience with just growing up in Hawaii, because I drink coconut water, I drink coconut milk, I use coconut oil. And so started playing with that. And then I just kind of came up with a concoction that became my breakfast. It was like the thing that I started my day with that would fuel me throughout the day. And then and I wouldn't eat until the afternoons, and I'd reduce my meal intake down to just 2 meals a day. And so that was really the beginning, and that concoction kind of evolved over time with, different quality coffees, different ways of making coffee, and then adding different different fats to it, and then realizing that fats helped you absorb other nutrients. And so I'll put some turmeric in it. I'd put some cacao in there, or I just make it straight with coconut milk and ghee, and just like experimenting and then coming up with a concoction that would fuel me for the day, and that I had incredible sustained energy and focus, and I would be able to, whether it was dig a ditch or ride a giant wave or paddle all day or run or bike or, just whatever I had to do. I really benefited from all those different, I would say, sensations, but all the different kind of the different nutrition I was getting, because I was getting, a caffeine, I was getting fat for the brain, caffeine for energy, mental focus, just all this stuff. And then I started sharing it with friends of mine. I would, friends would come over and I'd make it, and then they would experience, that same sensation. And I had, other things that I share with friends. I think that's something that's real Hawaiian or Hawaii, real Polynesian. We, in Aloha, there's a lot of sharing. So you share food when you catch food. You share, you just share things that are beneficial. And so,
when did you realize you had something bigger than just a personal experiment on your hands?
They would be like, "What is this stuff? I need to make it." And I'd tell them what ingredients, and they'd always come back and be, "Well, it wasn't the same as when you made it." I got to get this, this brand of that, and that brand of this. And one of my friends, my friend Paul Hodge, who I was doing another venture with. The electric golf board, not him and I were working on that project, and he tried it, and then he's like, "Oh my gosh, what is this stuff? I got to figure out, we got to make something with this." And so he started, he made a powdered version of the recipe, and about the third or fourth rendition of the powdered version was the original creamer. And we started sharing that, and people went crazy for it. So, we started the business, and we started just selling it online to, people that I knew and people that I was connected with through social media stuff. And then it grew into, okay, well, maybe we'll make another one. And then we made other flavored ones, and that had other nutritional benefits. And then, that was how Laird Superfood was born.
And for all your interests, and all the impact that you've had on various water sports, and I know you don't call yourself a surfer, you're a waterman and an innovator. You've innovated a lot. Why pursue food, or specifically, coffee and creamers, over other things you're involved with? What about that made you interested to pursue? Was it just the realization that you were doing this and people were interested in this thing? Was it just happen chance that it happened to be this, versus, say, paddleboarding or surfing, launching into that more as your sole business or focused business?
Yeah, well, listen, I think that I've done hard goods. I've had, I have an apparel line. I have a fitness company. We're entrepreneurs by heart, just because of the nature. Both Gabby and I, the nature of our platforms have always been small: beach volleyball, surfing. We've always had to be more, I'd say, creative and kind of, we've had to be entrepreneurs. And so, and we're in wellness, we're in health and wellness, we're in the categories. And the truth is that it's a natural extension. The reason why I've done any of the things that I've done have really been almost out of necessity, that they didn't exist. It would be not sometimes that, I'd rather not make a board or innovate some idea. If somebody else had done it, I wouldn't need to. So it was part of it, like, that it wasn't being done. And so the Laird Superfood is just part of that whole philosophy. It's a natural extension. And the truth is that only so many people can, ride a board, and only so many people can ride a wave, and only so many people can do certain innovations that I've been involved in, where, this kind of nutritional, I would say, innovation, but this nutrition company has a very broad appeal. A lot of people can consume, and most everyone needs to consume things that are good for them. It's birthed out of that philosophy that people, this is something that people need, and everybody needs it. And, everybody needs to have some sort of fitness program too, but not everybody has a wave near them or is going to go in the water or wants to work that hard, where everybody's going to drink some hydration during the day, have a coffee. These are things that are daily rituals. These are things that people are going to do every day.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. As you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. That's my favorite part, by the way. I have personally used LinkedIn for my hiring experiences, and it's worked really well. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs and reach a network of over 810 million people. And of those 810 million people, there are at least 40 million looking for jobs every single week. You can add the job, screen people, simple tools, easy to use, and quickly prioritize who's a good candidate and who isn't. And all this is why LinkedIn Jobs is rated #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors for small businesses. So if you're ready to find the right candidates fast and post your job for free, go to linkedin.com/ASP. That's linkedin.com/ASP to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I know a lot of the people listening to this show are doing their part to help fight climate change and not leave such a big carbon footprint on the earth. Well, I'm going to give you a new tool to add to your arsenal, and that is the Aspiration Zero credit card. How it works is every time you use it, they plant 2 trees. So literally every time you swipe your card, they plant 2 trees, which is about how much carbon dioxide is used every day or produced every day by the average American, is about how much 2 trees can absorb. So what's really cool is you can rest assured every time you use it, they're planting 2 trees. And to date, they've already planted 75 million trees. So if you want to make your dollars make a difference, apply for the Aspiration Zero credit card today and earn a $300 bonus after spending $3,000 in the first 90 days. Apply now at aspiration.com/ASP to go carbon neutral effortlessly and earn a $300 bonus. Go to aspiration.com/ASP. The Aspiration Zero MasterCard is issued by Beneficial State Bank pursuant to license by MasterCard International Incorporated. Good credit required. Terms and conditions apply. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode. That makes a lot of sense. I was curious about it, but to make the biggest impact on the most people is something that's universally consumed, because the moment you say, my focus is surfboards or something, yeah, you've narrowed it down quite a bit. There's still plenty of people doing it, but not nearly as much as drinking coffee. I'm drinking coffee right now, sadly, with none of your creamer in it. But
shame on you, bad boy. Yeah, but that's the truth, right? Is it? How can I have the biggest impact? I think a lot of the things that we do, we care, right? In a way, we have we were fortunate to have the lives that we have and do what we do for our livelihood. But the basis of our philosophy is that we care about people, right? And we want it and so we know, hey, fun things if we can promote things that are fun for people to do, that's good for people. If we can promote, or if we can create a company that gives people things that are good for them, like Laird Superfood and nutrition, well, that's good. That makes me feel like I feel good about that. I feel a worthy endeavor. Like that's something that that you can hold your head high and be like, hey, I'm helping people and giving them things that they need. So it's really it's birthed from that. It's birthed from that sharing kind of and I'd say it sounds almost altruistic, but that's the birth of it. It wasn't like, oh, I have an idea and people and it's the whole thing to be successful. It's like, well, no, the success comes from the quality of the idea, but you got to execute it too. So there's always that. There's plenty of ideas that that are incredible that just don't get executed. And so it has to be executed, but it is about the idea and providing people with something that they need in a cup or in a drink or in their nutritional needs. And that's and like you said, have what's the potential for the biggest impact? Well, so far, superfood has the potential to really have the biggest impact on people.
Speaking of pursuing something like that, you describe yourself, honestly, what I learned about you and Gabby is the most I learned about y'all was from each other, if that makes sense. Y'all really seem to be students of one another. You study each other. You obviously respect each other. But it was really interesting. As I was doing research to learn more, it was often just things the other one had mentioned about the other, if that makes sense. Y'all seem to know each other really well and study one another.
Well, that's true. I think that's helpful in having a long-standing relationship. I mean, if you want your relationship to work, probably a good idea to know the other person. So, I mean, if you don't know them, that's going to make the relationship difficult. So I think that's, and having respect, of course, that's the one thing that's the most critical piece of any successful relationship. In fact, one of the longest standing studies on, or one of the biggest studies on, successful marriages was, they found only one thing that was consistent amongst all successful relationships, and that wasn't it had nothing to do with who was the breadwinner or which roles were which. None of it. The only thing that it had to do with was respect. And so that is the critical element of a successful relationship. And I think understanding and knowing your partner. I mean, for me to say I know Gabby, that would be a little. She probably knows me because I'm a little simpler. She's more complex, and so for me, I'm just trying to. And I think you always have. We want to both be students. We always want to be a student, and we always want to be learning. I think that's a critical element of, I'd say, just staying young. Being interested and continuing to evolve, trying to grow, right? So the whole thing about the concept about being youthful is just about that means you're going to continue to grow, right? And so I think that learning is the critical element of that, and curiosity is a huge piece of that, and being and that's the critical element of being a student.
Absolutely. And one of the things that she reiterated a lot, as well as I've heard you mention other people, is just being an innovator, doing things in a really creative, unique, and in your own way, pioneering, of course, with tons of types of surfing. What is one of the earliest things you remember pioneering or innovating, whether that's something simple as a small kid or something more major? Do you have like an early memory where you went against the grain?
I mean, I kind of have a life against the grain a little bit. Just my nature has been, and how I grew up. My friend calls me the contrarian. I think I was in that environment, right? I kind of was against the grain. I mean, I maybe culturally I was against the grain because I was. I grew up in early surfing culture, right? My parents were early surfers in the beginning of the whole surfing culture, and surfing was very rebellious, right? Like in the early days of surfing in the 60s, and then into the early 70s, it was all about rebellion, right? So in a way, surfing's grounded in that. And so I think I'm a product of that, right? I'm a little bit of a product of culturally growing up in rebellion and kind of, going against the norms of, how you what you'll do in your life, and what your interests are. And I mean, if you look at any of the old surf movies and you watch those things, it's all about the guys kind of going against the normal kind of set out program, what you'll do when you grow up. I remember when I was a little kid, or not a little kid, when I got a little older, I was like a teenager. I remember this one older Hawaiian man that I really respected, that I used to work a lot for and learn, fished with him and farmed with him. And he was like the chief of the village. And, he said to me, hey, boy, you can't eat your surfboard, because I was like surfing too much. Like I would be everything, surf. And he was like, hey, boy, you cannot eat that. You can't eat your surfboard, boy. Because in his mind, there, you're going to have to get a conventional job and live a conventional life more. It was more cut and dry. And I've been fortunate to experience the ability to actually be able to make a living from the surfboard. And indirectly, I've been able to, make a living from being an athlete and being and perfecting a skill at an activity and building a brand through that. And there's, it's been a real fortunate thing. I mean, it doesn't mean that it hasn't taken as much, maybe even more work than a conventional job would have taken, probably more, because you don't ever stop. It's every day, all night, it's not Monday through Friday.
Can't eat your surfboard. That's they didn't tell the sharks that. No, that's amazing. Just being able to go against the grain your entire life, which is, obviously led to doubters, but it's paid off for you. Maybe, you're outside the rules of a lot of ways, but it's been a lot of hard work.
Yeah. And it's freed me up. I think, at the end of the day, I mean, if I look at the hours and the work that I put down and the effort I put into what I've done, I mean, if you put that much work and that much effort and that much focus into anything, you would reap some reward. There would be a reward for that. And I think many times it's just a reminder of that, right? I think sometimes we have a tendency that we're looking for this easy way out, right? It's like, how do I get the most out of the least? Instead of just how do I put the most in no matter what I get out of it, because you're going to get rewarded for just that alone, just for the effort that you put into it. You'll be rewarded, and just the satisfaction of putting that kind of focus and energy into something. And so, there's no doubt that there's been a lot of blood and a lot of sweat that's been put down into what I've done, and I'm fortunate to be able to have done something that I really love, right? So I really love what I've been able to do, and I've also had the freedom to do it the way I want, how I want, when I want. But that could just lead to not doing it at all, where if you weren't focused and driven and impassioned and disciplined and all those other things that are critical in no matter what you decide to do.
Was there a time in your life where you didn't feel focused? Maybe an era or just something brief, or a situation? And if so, how'd you deal with it? What did you do to refocus?
I mean, I think that's an ongoing thing, there's a continual refocusing every day, listen, when it's a little bit like a flywheel. When you get it rolling, it's easier to keep it rolling. But, I think obviously when I was, when I was younger and I hadn't done the things that I've done, I think I think there was a lot of doubt, whether I was going to be able to do what I believed I could do. I think but that was never more than the belief that I could do what I saw, right? Like I could do the things that I believed I could. I think that was more powerful than me not believing that I could. But, I think when I've been hurt, I've had a bunch of injuries. I think the injuries have always, kind of opened the door to for some doubt to come in and to maybe, hey, I'm not going to be able to do it like I did do it, or as well as I did it, or what can I do it again? I mean, all that stuff that your brain does, that all our brains do, that just has a tendency to spin us. You have that little voice in the back of your head just chirping away. Hey, you're not going to be able to do it like you could do it, or will I be able to do it as well, or all that stuff that our brain does. I think that's pretty natural. So I think after you've been through that enough times, you get kind of better at the process, and it has less power over you. I think when you're younger, you have so many absolutes, and so your doubts are more defined, and your everything's more black and white. And then when you get a little older, you're like, everything's not, and you also get through it. You get experience. It's like you get better at being hurt and then getting better. You just get better at that. You get better at that whole process because you've been through it a bunch of times. And, when you're down, you've been there before, so it's not so devastating, and you pull out quicker. You pull the plane out before it crashes. It's interesting when you do things like I've been able to do, you get like a post-traumatic syndrome, where you come out of these, riding these giant waves or doing something, fast, far, high, whatever it is, you accomplish something, and then you get like a come down, and then you get like a depression after that. And, it's a mild version of what people experience in more severe situations, but it's still severe for you. And then you get good at it. You're like, oh yeah, here we go again. I'm getting a little depressed because I'm coming off of this thing. Or when you're in the middle of, kind of doing something that's a great sensation, you're reminded like, hey, after this, I'm going to crash. I'm going to have a little bit of a descent off of this mountain. And when I need to pull, don't indulge yourself. I used to, I enjoyed a good glass of wine, maybe more than just one, and so I would come off of these experiences, and then I'd couple glasses of wine and, a little depressed, and then get more depressed, and then not, just not be aware of it. And I think, after time, you start becoming more conscious of it. And then it's like, then you stop doing stuff that really actually doesn't support you. And then you get better at it. Pretty soon you barely even have it happen, because you're like, you already know it's coming, and you're already supporting yourself to get through it, and it's temporary.
So I do know that you did have a time where you admitted to just having too much to drink, and you eventually cut that out of your life. What does it mean now to be able to have a beer you can enjoy? Obviously a collaboration beer, Superfood Swell. What is it like to introduce that into your life? Because I'll say this, my dad quit drinking when I was born. And that's probably the biggest gift he ever gave me, because he had a problem, and has not touched a drink since. He found out my mom was pregnant with me and said, oh my God, I got to get my life together. And so he set a beer down on a payphone, which, if you remember those, the folks that are listening, never touched one again. And, but he drank non-alcoholic beer my whole life. So when I was found out about Athletic Brewing, it was just like, oh yeah, I know there's people out there, but this is not just for my dad. It's something I like beer, but I can enjoy this with him at a campfire. My brothers who have medical issues can enjoy these beers because they can't have alcohol. And it's like, it's the one thing we can all have together without compromise. And for you, I want to hear about that ability to now, have a beer like this.
Well, I think there's obviously things about fermentation and, the process of what that is, that it's actually good for you. So when I'm looking at stuff and I'm going, okay, I'm not enjoying things that are replacing something that wasn't good for me, but because I really want something that's not good for me, I'm going to do this thing. So for me, I feel like it's more out of the other part, which is like, hey, this stuff is, I'm consuming things that are good for me. And so so that's an interesting dynamic. It's like, I think it's kind of an interesting setup where you're like, oh, well, I don't do this thing that I know is not good for me, but I do this other thing to replace that because I really want to do the other one, but I don't do it because I'm past that, which is like, hey, you know what? Like I like that flavor. I know like I said, the fermentation, there's things that are good for my stomach. It's beneficial. So I'm using it that way. I'm using stuff that I like that's beneficial, right? We know fermentation, and we know like hops, and we know this stuff like that there's some stuff about it that's good for you. And so I'm using it that way, not with the concept, hey, I got this thing I really like, but I'm not going to do it. I'll take this other thing that replaces that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
When you're in a mode where everything you're doing in a way you're trying to support the whole system, right? And so I think the psychology behind that too, because I remember when I first had one of the athletic brews, I had it, and I had like, I didn't know it wasn't I thought it was like when I drank it, I thought it was a real beer, and I was like, oh my God, I just drank a beer. Like I had a sip of a beer because it gave me some kind of mental flashback. And I was like, and then once I realized, I go, oh, that's right, it's not. Okay, great. Like I didn't, it was a very strange sensation that I experienced because that flavor and that taste brought back something in my head where I had, and listen, I'm like your dad, where when my girls came along, I was like, you know what? If they're going to drink in their life, they're going to do that on their own. They're going to discover on their own, but they're not going to do it because, like, I grew up in a house with people that drank alcohol. Alcohol has been around. Alcohol is everywhere. It's hard to even get away from it. And so, so for me, I stopped for that reason, and because I wanted more performance. And at a certain point, it's like, you're not going to discover something new. Sometimes people think if they just keep drinking, they're going to get something new. And I go, but you do lose some of that, like you said, sharing the time with your dad, your brother. There is a kind of social thing that does go with enjoying things that we enjoy, that we do together, that kind of thing, especially when it comes to a beverage or a meal or something. That's one of the most primal communal things that we do.
Yes, it is an amazing unifier to be able to have that together and enjoy that and talk about the style, talk about the complexity of it, and just the craft behind it. It's a lot of fun. It's great. It's allowed us to get that time without any awkwardness or anything. So it's really cool. A couple questions that came from our founder, Bill, who I know is a huge fan of y'all. He has learned something from Gabby that he's teaching us at Athletic Brewing. He mentions it a lot, actually. And I don't know how much you know about the principle that Gabby talks about of going first, but Bill has instilled that in himself to where he is the person that introduces himself first, says hello first, and he's always telling us about that philosophy of going first and how much more positive it can make your life and how much more opportunities it opens, and just generally how much better life can be when you commit to going first with introductions or just being out on a run, saying hello, not waiting for the other person. It really breaks a lot of barriers. Are you familiar with that, what Gabby talks about? And if so, tell us a little bit about more where that comes from and maybe some of the things it's opened in y'all's life.
Well, listen, think about it philosophically in a more broad term. I used to have a great saying that someone shared with me once, and they were applying it to some of the things that I've been involved with. But someone must go first to lead the way, and so and that applies to, just go down the list, like what like into the unknown, into the thing with initiating a conversation, like with a person, trying something for the first time, being the guinea pig, like just whatever it is. I think that philosophy in general only reaps rewards and benefits. That's your, what do they say? Does, Mikey likes it. Let Mikey try it, see if he likes it. It's and when you deal with people, when you initiate it, it definitely opens the door, right? It And it does it so immediately, which is so, that's what's so productive about it, right? It's such a productive, it's really a way to live at the end of the day. It's, it's a way to live. It's the willingness to kind of, and that's connected to you're okay to have rejection. You're okay to fail. Like that's connected to that as well, because you may go first and then somebody may respond wrong, but it's okay. Like you can only do that if you're, willing to fail. And then, what do they say? There's great honor in a failed attempt, but no honor in no attempt. And so those all tie together with that philosophy of, going first. And those are valuable life values. That's a value that you can live by.
And it can be a range. Going first doesn't mean, it can mean everything from saying hello on an elevator first before, waiting on other people or somewhere else that people don't typically say hello, or riding the biggest wave of all time, or starting a non-alcoholic brewery. Going first can be kind of any size you want it to be.
And actually those are, what do they say? How you do the little things is how you do the big things, right?
Yeah. How you do anything is how you do everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's all ties in together, that whole, and that's the willingness to help people. That's the willingness to, that's one of the most important things that we can do. I think that's actually probably the most evolved state that you can be in as a human, right? That it's like the most evolved state is to initiate things first, whether it's help or contact or, the communication or, or test the rocket or whatever it is. I mean, and that goes with curiosity too. That's right. That ties back in with, being curious and being a student. And that's all part of that philosophy.
So having started Laird Superfood, not all that long ago, 8 years ago or so, I want to know what are some of the biggest changes about your health and your diet, or your philosophy around health and diet in the last 5 years, if there are any? Has there been any major realizations or major changes in the way you approach your health and diet?
I mean, other than trying to find higher quality stuff. I mean, listen, we keep learning so much about, fasting and about, breath work and heat and ice and all these. I mean, there's so many pieces to health and wellness, so I think it's, I don't know if there's any one thing. I think there's probably a multitude of things that we continue to refine and add, maybe add a twist to it, or just, it's a little bit like, I think your health is like polishing a stone, like as you get the grits down and you get finer and finer, you polish more and more and it gets shinier and shinier. But I think that's kind of the process, right? It's that kind of evolution where, you do, in the beginning, you do bigger, broader things. And then there's just a continual refinement, and you might, there's little tweaks here and there, right? There's little spots that you rub harder for longer in your polishing. I think that and then a bit, I think to be, they say forewarned is forearmed. Is like, getting assessed, getting yourself looked at. I think that's a big piece. Don't just wait until for the surprise. Like, go check yourself. Go. What do they say? Check yourself before you wreck yourself. I mean, just check. Like, see what's going on. Do your blood work. Get your, look at your colon. Get your heart checked. Get your this done. Yeah, I mean, just look, check, see what's going on. And I think that's a big piece of it too. I think as I've gone, obviously as you get older, you start to get more, I wouldn't say concerned as much as just curious about the state of the way your system's running, and is your philosophy and the things that your habits and your practices, are those paying dividends? Are those, and you some of the stuff's a little invisible unless you go do your blood work and get your blood panels and have somebody who really knows what they're doing to look at that stuff, and it's some of the stuff isn't, some of the stuff costs money, but a lot of it's just, it's more about having the courage to do it, because a lot of people don't want to see, they don't want to know, they're a little scared. So, but that's not going to help if something's going on. You not knowing isn't going to make it better. So I think there's there's a responsibility that you have to yourself, to your family, people you care about, to kind of, dig in a little bit.
And it may not be that complicated. Just the other day, my truck was acting up, and it had been, and I was just baffled about what was going on. And come to find out, it was just low on oil, and I just totally overlooked that, which is the first thing you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I didn't look, and that was the only problem. It was leaking oil, so it was much lower than it should have been. But it was just literally the tightening of some bolts and filling it back up.
Exactly.
That was it.
Well, that's the point, right? That's the point. The point is that, and that's where having good practices and good habits in general lead to less surprises too, right? So, and the more aware you are of how you feel and what's going on with your system, the better. I mean, because then you're like, because like Paul Chek says, you're the greatest doctor you're ever going to know. And that, I think sometimes there's a disconnect with people where they think they go to the doctor and he's going to tell them how they feel. You're going to tell yourself how you feel. You're going to know if you're in connection and in contact with yourself, you're going to be the one that goes, hey, when I eat that, it doesn't feel so good. Or, hey, when I don't get good sleep, I, da-da-da. Or, I mean, you're going to be the one that has no one's going to fix you better than you can. Now, once you know something's up, then you can go to a specialist and they can tell you specifically what's going on or not. But, I think there's a little disconnect sometimes that people have a tendency to be, they're kind of shifting the responsibility away from themselves. That's a bad recipe for life.
For someone that, things don't seem difficult for you, or the most difficult things seem to just, you're able to tackle them so effortlessly from the outside looking in. I know that might not be the case all the time, but what is difficult for you? Either a bad habit or something that has been more challenging to kick? Is it junk food or something simple like that, or does everything come easy as it seems?
I mean, the difficult thing for me is monotony. Just monotony, like when things are too common.
And how much of your life is monotony?
Sometimes not very much, but other times, the pandemic brought a certain monotonous into it, but it also created a certain urgency that created some focus. But, it's Gabby always laughs. Like, we went to Bahamas one time and the islands are flat, the ocean's flat, everything's flat, not too windy, not too much, there's like, and those environment, people are like, oh, these people, you must love it down there. And Gabby's like, yeah, no, he's not, this isn't exactly his ideal, environment. But, I think that monotony, that when things are real, Groundhog Day-ish, I think that's where I can spin my tires a little bit. And I think that's where I have to kind of watch my attitude. What do they say? Check yourself before you wreck yourself. I have to watch myself in that time because I feel like I have less purpose. I feel like I'm good when there's chaos. I'm good in the hurricane, and I'm good in the avalanche. I'm good in the other places where I kind of have at least I have a mission, right? And whether it's survive or do whatever I got to do or whatever that looks like, but it makes things a little more clear sometimes when you're just sitting in the stillness and it's just the same kind of, there's a monotony to it. That's when I have to retain my cool. Like I got to retain myself and try to get calmer, and I don't mean calmer as much as just, I need to just remember that it's temporary, right? That remember that it's temporary and that I'll be back in position of having purpose, where and not that I don't have purpose in those moments, but it's just, it's that, what do they say? Idle hands of the devil's playground. I mean, there's a certain level of, there's room for the little voice to start chirping. And so I always have to remind myself during those times that's temporary.
Now, what do you do to introduce that if you are finding yourself kind of going through the motions? Or does it find you?
I always have to remind myself I'm fortunate to know that if I just make myself tired, it's all good, So it's back to like how I better at school. If I can tire myself, then it takes, as my friend Mr. Wildman would say, the piss and vinegar out of me. It takes the potentially bad attitude out. It just eliminates all that stuff. So I just need to work hard. I just need to put my head down, and and that's the part where it's the challenging part, because when it's monotonous, it's like sometimes you're just not driven. You're like, you're not driven. When you have a mission, and that drives you, right? If you have a giant wave, or if there's a natural disaster, you're like, it's clear, you activate. But when it's just still and it's calm, you're like, okay, you gotta activate. And so you gotta dig down into the well to activate.
What's your mission right now?
Oh, well, survive parenting. I think that's the, that's a mission. There's no end to that one. I have a bunch of projects that I'm working on, and I'm always looking at the ocean. So, I'm fortunate to have a consistent lifelong mission, which is the sea, right? It's my adventures and my activities and my personal desires and goals in the ocean. And, so I have that. That's kind of will be I don't see any end in sight. That's a little bit like knowledge, where there's no end in sight. So that's I do always have that, right? So I always have to use that as a motivation, and in times of stillness to continue to drive me, because I know I'm going to be, I'm going to need the energy. I'm going to need the skill. I'm going to need the athleticism. I'm going to need all this stuff at some point. And so I better, stay in tuned.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, I tell you what, if you have just a couple minutes, I'd love to ask you a couple rapid fire questions, and we'll wrap this up.
Perfect.
What are you most curious about right now outside of surfing or the water in general?
What am I the most curious? The status of mankind.
That's very, very curious and large topic. Yes. There's about 7-8 billion ways that could go.
Yeah, I'm busy.
You're busy. Yeah, you got a lot on your plate there. Proudest achievement outside of the water. I'm just going to keep going with that because you've got so much in that. I want to know something outside of that.
My family.
I had a feeling. That was coming. Biggest goal not yet achieved. That one's going to be interesting.
Biggest goal not yet achieved. What the rest of my life is going to look like. Like how's it going to go? How am I going to go here? What can I do? How much more can I do before the end? That's my biggest goal.
Maybe not top two of the most important things you try to instill in your kids. Maybe principles or habits.
Top two? Oh.
Well, among the top two, because I know that can be hard.
Let's first be a good person. Be a good person. And that means be empathetic and loving and respectful and all those values that come with being a good person. At the end of the day, I could just say the 10 Commandments. Start.
Yeah, there you go.
Start there.
Nice, simple top 10 list.
Yeah.
God's top 10
Yeah.
is what I call it. What's a hobby that you have that folks maybe don't know about or you don't talk about?
I don't think people fully understand my level of that I'm a farmer. Yeah, that I'm that I grow things and that I've grown things and that I've been involved in since I was a kid. I've been involved in farming and I'm a farmer.
That's where all those mushrooms for the creamer are coming from.
Well,
Okay.
listen, I have so many. I mean, I've spent years just being involved in all different types of farming. I have a project right now in Hawaii, a farm project. So I'm all about growing, planting and growing stuff.
I'm not going to ask you what your favorite Athletic Brewing beer is because I have a feeling it's Superfood Swell.
Yeah.
But we'll tell folks where to find it. But the last question on every can of Athletic Brewing, it says brew without compromise. But going back to how you do anything is how you do everything. We believe you kind of have to live without compromise. You can't just do one thing really excellently. You have to kind of just be that type of person and live that way. What does it mean to you to live without compromise?
To live without compromise, it means to be honest, to be truthful.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
What's that place you've always wanted to try? Well, you're there, sharing plates with...
Just one bite.
Or on second thought, maybe not sharing. It's that good. When you're with Amex, it's not if it's going to happen, but when. American Express. Don't live life without it.
Hi, I've got a prescription for diabetes test strips. How much is the copay?
That could take me a while to calculate. In the meantime, you should think about over-the-counter Contour Next test strips. You get 35 for $19.99, and they're highly accurate. For full details, visit contournext.com/radio.